In this video, I'm going to teach you how to identify and fix errors in a PDF sheet set before printing. And this is an important step because as we've looked and created this drawing set, we've focused in on each sheet sort of as an individual unit, but it's important to zoom out and just kind of make any final changes so that everything looks good and it's a holistic representation of high quality work. So I'm looking at this sheet set, and we've got it zoomed to fit on the page, and so that's really going to be helpful for us. We can see it nice and big. And I'm just going to go sheet by sheet and call out the things that a designer who's got our skill set and is familiar with looking at pages with a critical eye towards layout might notice about each sheet. So I'm going to start with the first one, and you can see I have added in the cloud rendering of the exterior. And you can see that I've got a couple little margin issues to fix. So you can see here there's an inconsistency in the margins across these three, but the ones on the top and the bottom look good. You can also see that there's some kind of issue on this rendering right here on the edge piece. And it could just be maybe a filled region or a wall's out of place. So before I submit this sheet set to my project manager, I would go ahead and make those changes. The rest of it, I'm checking and seeing. Sheet name and number, all of the text looks good. It appears to be correct. Everything is sitting nicely on this page, and once those changes are made, that page will be complete. Okay, now looking back on here, again, I haven't looked at any of these sheets since I created them at the very beginning. So what I would need to do for this sheet specifically is to go ahead and hide my site plans. And I would hide everything except for the building here because it's the level 2 floor plan. And so it shouldn't show any of the site information. So I also want to make sure that any extra tags and sections that I've used to visualize and troubleshoot throughout have been hidden. So I would also hide this tag. I would hide the flooring finishes here because that's not relevant information on a floor plan. Floor plan is really just information about tags and relevant views, and the rest of it, reveals itself on the design plan. So I would hide that. I would hide the finishes. I would hide the outlets, which are showing up because of how low the cut plane is set here and where they're located on the wall. And for the rest of that, I am going to go ahead and keep the frontis piece in now that that's been added in. But once those big site elements are hidden, the flooring is hidden, these are hidden, and the extra tags and section things and everything that's not appearing later on in our sheet set is hidden, then this will be a very easy view to see. So again, we just want to keep the section and elevation tags that relate to drawings that are later in the sheet set, and those you can see are populated with letters and numbers. So the rest of them, the empty ones, those are the ones that would need to be hidden. But again, that's a messy sheet. We haven't looked at this sheet in a really long time, so we've added quite a bit to it. Okay, let's move on. This one is also, this sheet's looking pretty good too. There's a lot of important information on here. What I would do is just begin by hiding this component right here, figuring out what this line is and trying to hide it. I suspect that's probably the AutoCAD file coming in through that would need to be hidden. I would also hide this tag because it's not relevant to this drawing. And I would also hide these empty section tags that are brought in. It looks like we've got several insets or several extra drawings here that are being referenced by this cut line, and so we would need to hide that as well. Besides that, though, the drawing itself looks really good. As far as for the interior section facing south, we do have some landscaping and things that are showing up. So I would have to adjust this, the cut plane for this drawing on this sheet, just to make sure that that this section indeed is an interior section, and so an interior section wouldn't have landscaping on it. I would also hide all of these tags that are not populated, and this ceiling actually needs to be moved up just a little bit because it's imposing on the height of those windows. Now, I don't want to move the windows down because then I've got to re-render everything, but moving that ceiling up just a little bit to make room will look very good. Other than that, you know, the labels and tags, the rest of the notations work. We just want to make sure that this says number 2 instead of number 3, so that would need to be renumbered. As far as being centered on the page, the rest of these elements look wonderful and consistent. And once I hide the landscaping here by adjusting the crop window, and perhaps even hiding some if there's some left over, because we will see this, so we might still see a little bit of landscaping. Once we hide that, then this number ought to align with the left edge of the drawing, and so that looks really good there. Okay, so we have some exterior elevations running to the south, and we also have some things that need to be hidden here. You can see that the trees are covering up the exterior elevations, and even though you would in fact see this on an elevation, these elevations are focused more on the building structure, not the actual landscaping. So I'm gonna hide all the landscaping here on these exterior elevations. I will keep the scale figures though, because on an elevation, those can be really helpful. You know, it depends on the preference of the designer, but I like a scale figure to give information about a space, so I'm gonna keep those. You can see that we also have some remaining CAD files and things that need to be hidden that are also imposing on these drawings. So that would need to be hidden as well. You can see here we've got some plans coming in, so that needs to be hidden. This needs to be hidden. And then these will start to just kind of go back to looking really plain and crisp. You can see here I've got a crop window that's going to need adjustment so that the frontispiece is visible, and I suspect that the case will be the same for this one as well, because you'll see the frontispiece on the side elevation there. Once I make those adjustments, I may have to shift these drawings around just a little bit. But other than that, you know, these, even though there's quite a bit of things that need to be hidden, this is still a really beautiful sheet, and made even more beautiful by all of the hard work and modeling that has been done to the architectural features. Okay, this sheet was so much work to create at the beginning, and so luckily not much of the changes that we've made since we created it need to be you know, adjusted or undone or hidden or anything. So this sheet was unaffected, which is good considering how much work it was to create it. The only thing that we would need to just change is we need to go ahead and hide this little level marker here, because it's not relevant to this drawing and is compromising the clarity just a bit. But the rest of these looks good. No changes here. Okay, for this sheet, the interior elevations, these are very minimalist interior elevations. So they don't have a ton of information or detail, but you know, that wasn't necessarily the focus of this class, but we do have a lot of information that we did learn how to put in here. So all I need to do to clean up this sheet is I'm going to go ahead and hide the tags that are empty, because again, these were put here for us to see other things that were happening in, and could be either deleted at this point to clean up the project, or just hidden if we want to. So again, that's up to the designer, you know, how much stuff you want on that project browser, if you can go ahead and delete views that are no longer used. What I do want to do though is make sure that the crop window is showing here, and all you would do to create to select that would be to click on the crop window and just right click and make sure that it's unhidden in view. Sometimes it still gets hidden and there's just like it just doesn't look quite right and it's hard to fix it. And so when that's the case, all you would do is just go to the annotate tab and hit a detail line and just draw a little box around this. And that makes it so that it appears that there's a crop window even if it's not showing up very well. For this view, you can see here, I'm still missing a ground line. And so again, just kind of double clicking on that crop window to make sure that it's adjusted. And I can show it to you right here now, just since we're there. That those crop windows you can see are right here. And sometimes if they're not showing or they're cropping off a little bit too much, they need to just be brought down just a little bit. To adjust, and I would have to zoom in here, but I actually don't have my mouse attached right now, so it's a little bit difficult for me to do it. But just zooming in and either aligning those the ground line with the ground line of the room, or again, if it's looking strange and you just can't quite get it fixed, going to annotate, creating a detail line, and then just drawing a box on your sheet. So it's just, you know, part of practicing and kind of working through the visibility parts of it. But I definitely do need to hide the studio lights here. And I could reduce or hide the texture here just a bit so it's not quite as distracting. And I think it would benefit this image to not see all of that stippling because it almost indicates a texture that's different from gypsum wallboard. So I would also just kind of grab that and right click and hide it in view just to clean it up a little bit. I have called this here lounge area, but I'm also going to change that to, I believe it's called workspace. And if we look on our level 2 floor plan, that area is called workspace. So just to make it consistent, I will go ahead and make that change on my sheet set as well, because it's interesting when you work on a project, whatever room names sort of either come up organically by the people working on the space, or are, you know, named with you know, a detailed or linear thought process, they stick. And it's important to make sure that you're consistent with those. So somehow that got changed from lounge area from workspace. So I'm going to make sure to change that. Okay, room finish schedule, again, hasn't had a lot of changes made to it that might affect the overall graphic appearance, except if for some reason this little door schedule part is underneath the page border. So I'm going to shift all of that up, and it's probably going to affect the consistency between this margin and this margin. So I'm going to grab the group, move it up, and then fix any margins as necessary. Other than that, it looks like all the information is still there. It's not cropped. It's not, you know, hyphenated or going on you know, a line in the same way. Here we've got a little hyphen there, but it's across words instead of, you know, hyphenated right after the N, for example, which would make it a little bit messy to read. But I'm happy with the way that this page looks, with the exception of that little change right there. Okay, so this is the design plan. And again, this here is got all that site information. So just like on the floor plan, we're going to hide all that site information because it's not relevant here. And if we were going to include it, we would include it as a black and white line drawing on a new sheet that had the specifics of the site. And we're not going to create a new sheet for a site plan because we really don't know enough about site plans to make a good one. And I don't want us to have one in our sheet set that just shows that we kind of know enough to be dangerous. I want this site information to just be relevant to the rendering. And so we're going to hide it everywhere else. As far as visibility goes, this is rendering in a realistic finish, which, or realistic setting, which isn't going to look good when we print it out in black and white. So I'm going to change the settings here from realistic to one that's just going to give me black and white line work. I still want all of the textures to show, but I don't want all this color to be added in. This here, because this was applied as a paint finish, I would just have to make sure that there's an actual tile assigned to it, and I'll show you how to check right now. If we look at the design plan, what we can do is I can click on that travertine finish by looking at manage and materials. And I created that within the frontispiece, so you don't have to, you won't have to mess with that too much. But what you can do if you wanted to shift it was to find the material. I'll just go ahead and show you on an example so that you don't have to hunt for it. But going to the travertine and then going to the surface pattern and assigning it, instead of this being none, having it look something that's, you know, somewhat tile-like. And because that's got what they call an ashlar pattern, the best option we really have is just to use one of these tiles here that indicates the finish, that it is going to be tile, because we don't have a good pattern match that works, and making new ones of these involves tinkering with Revit code, which is way, 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 way outside of our area of expertise. But in any case, the rest of this is just going to be kind of that, you know, black and white line drawing so that it's nice and clear. Okay, let's go back to our drawing set. The rest of it, you know, once all that site is hidden, I'll just kind of verify and make sure that the margins are the same on the side. It looks like they're just slightly different, so it needs to be shifted over just a little bit to the left. Okay, here's our reflected ceiling plan. And again, you know, this needs to be hidden. That's pretty obvious. The rest of this, all I would need to do is shift this label down. And I'll go ahead and hide the indications for the two scale figures here. Shift this down to accommodate the frontispiece that has been added in. And I'm going to put a little pendant right here, and maybe a sconce on either side of the door, just to fill up this space a little bit and so that it looks good on the plan. I'm also going to change this finish because right now it's got concrete, and so it's reading as gray, because that's what's, you know, the entire ceiling slab right there that I put on there. It's like through and through been assigned the concrete finish. So it just needs a layer of like waterproof gyp or you know, stone or something, so that it's got a finish that's not just concrete. Because once you walk through this beautiful frontispiece, most people would look up and you want something pretty on the ceiling. Other than that, the rest of these drawings, you know, have held up overall. The changes that we've made to this drawing set, they look good. Whatever this little line is here, I'm going to get rid of it. And I suspect that this line right here and this line right here is CAD file. So that's going to need to be hidden as well. But other than that, this sheet still looks pretty good. On these sheets, I just inserted images onto the, I created an exterior rendering sheet and put this exterior rendering in it. And I indicated what this render setting was and how we did it, because I want to make sure that if anybody sees this sheet set, that they know that I was testing renderings in this project, and I was testing techniques for renderings and not trying to make perfect renderings, because, you know, a trained eye would still look at this and probably make a few more changes to it, but I just wanted to indicate that this was our first try, and we rendered it within the program, and this is what we got. On this last page of the drawing set, I also brought in the rendering that we created. And once again, I just indicated that through this notation that we were focusing on actually the post-production Photoshop work here with the scale figures and the view out the window, instead of really going back into this rendering and making it look perfect. Were I to be focused 100% on a beautiful rendering instead of Photoshop techniques of the rendering, I would come back here and make sure that my baseboards were showing. I would apply, some finish to the wall, get, a little object, flower pot or something on this table. I'd probably put, a couple of the little accessories, maybe a sign on this door. I would hide this thing, and, again, kind of bring casing in and stuff, just to elevate this space from what it looks like now to an actual functional live-in space and workspace. But right now, that wasn't the focus of these drawings. So I wanted to make sure that a person who looked at this drawing set knew that, and so that's why I put this label here. Other than that, you can see that a drawing set that's had this much work put in it and has had this review still is not done. It still has one more set of refinements to make before it could be shown to a manager, because all the things that we've talked about on each sheet are not related to, construction details or information that we don't know. These are all changes that we already know how to make, and we already know how to spot, and we already know how to fix. So that's the last step before this goes to our manager. Once we've made those changes, all we have to do is go back to print this, and just a quick review. We want to print it to a PDF, combine multiple files. We can select our sheets by unchecking this box. I have already checked those. We hit OK. We go to Setup. We make sure it's set to a landscape orientation. Paper size is tabloid. The zoom is 100%, because if we fit to page, the scale will be wrong. And then once you hit OK, it will print a PDF. And once that PDF is been either placed on a flash drive or sent to the plotter, it's ready to print into a hard copy. And you would just staple this sheet set and hand it to your manager with a red pen and say, I appreciate all of the feedback you can give me on this. Thank you for your time. Nicely done.